Environmental services form the foundation of many aspects of modern life. Even when they are not immediately visible, ecosystems provide clean air, safe water, fertile soils, and countless other functions that support well-being and economic activity. As urbanization expands, industries grow, and agricultural systems intensify, these natural processes are placed under increasing pressure. The balance between economic development and environmental protection becomes more delicate, and the consequences of overlooking this relationship become more apparent. This part introduces the idea that long-term growth depends not only on economic decisions, but also on the protection of the natural systems that make that growth possible. It encourages a closer look at how society benefits from these services and why safeguarding them is essential for sustainable progress. The journey into environmental services begins by understanding how ecosystems function and how human activity interacts with them. It starts with recognizing that many of the benefits provided by nature are not captured in traditional economic thinking. As the concepts deepen, it becomes easier to see how these services can be classified, valued, and incorporated into decision-making. From there, the focus shifts naturally toward the policies that attempt to guide responsible management. This creates a continuous flow between ecological understanding and practical application, showing how knowledge about ecosystem functions supports better choices for sustainable development. Nature supports an entire hidden economy that operates quietly in the background of daily life. Beyond tangible resources such as water, timber, and food, ecosystems regulate the climate, pollinate crops, and maintain soil fertility. These activities, although often unnoticed, form an interdependent system that sustains communities and economies. Human activities have disrupted many of these natural processes, altering landscapes and reducing the quality of the services they offer. Degraded ecosystems no longer provide the same stability, and societies begin to feel the consequences. Reflecting on this invisible economy highlights how essential it is to protect natural capital and ensure that these vital functions continue into the future. Economic activities can generate unintentional impacts that fall outside traditional market transactions. These external effects, whether pollution, resource depletion, or loss of biodiversity, create costs that are not directly paid by those who cause them. Problems such as free riding arise because environmental goods often lack clear ownership, allowing individuals or companies to benefit without contributing to their protection. Pollution can spread far beyond the point of origin, affecting distant communities and ecosystems. Meanwhile, the short-term gains of certain activities rarely compensate for the long-term social costs they impose. Understanding these dynamics reveals why market systems alone cannot manage environmental issues effectively and why complementary mechanisms are needed. The tension between economic development and environmental protection is a recurring challenge. Organizations must respond to growing pressure from regulators, consumers, and communities to incorporate sustainability into their operations. Economic incentives can either support or undermine environmental goals depending on how they are designed. Tools such as pollution taxes and subsidies for cleaner technologies help steer behavior toward more responsible practices. Even so, finding the appropriate level of intervention remains complex, as decisions often involve balancing competing interests and perspectives. The discussion highlights how thoughtful policy design and informed judgment are essential to achieve development without compromising natural systems. Forests offer far more than their commercial value as sources of timber. They regulate water cycles, absorb carbon, provide habitats for wildlife, and create spaces for recreation and cultural enjoyment. Their multifunctional role makes them critical components of environmental stability. Managing forests is challenging because they serve many purposes at once, often with competing demands. Recognizing their broader importance encourages a more holistic approach, where ecological, social, and economic dimensions are considered in tandem. This perspective helps illustrate why forests must be valued as complex systems rather than simply as sources of raw materials. Traditional markets focus primarily on goods that can be bought and sold, overlooking many services that ecosystems deliver. As a result, activities that protect soil, reduce erosion, or mitigate flooding may go unrecognized, and unrewarded. New approaches have started to address this gap, particularly through payment schemes in which beneficiaries compensate those who manage ecosystems in sustainable ways. These mechanisms encourage practices that maintain or enhance environmental services, aligning economic incentives with ecological needs. By internalizing the value of these services, societies can create more resilient systems and reduce long-term environmental risks. Coastal areas provide a clear example of how diverse environmental services operate together. Mangrove forests, for instance, protect shorelines from storms, support fisheries by serving as nursery areas, supply raw materials, and store significant amounts of carbon. When these systems are damaged, both ecological resilience and community welfare decline. Rehabilitation becomes more complex because it must address environmental, social, physical, and economic factors at the same time. This interconnected perspective shows how maintaining healthy ecosystems supports stability, livelihoods, and long-term sustainability, particularly in regions vulnerable to climate impacts. Environmental services encompass the wide range of benefits that ecosystems provide. These include both visible outputs, such as food and water, and less tangible processes, such as climate regulation and soil formation. Understanding this concept creates a bridge between ecological functions and collective well-being. It also encourages a more integrated way of thinking about the relationship between human society and nature, highlighting how deeply economic systems rely on the continued functioning of natural processes. Environmental services represent the broad collection of interactions and benefits generated through ecosystem processes. They include provisioning benefits such as materials and food, regulating services like flood control and carbon storage, cultural values linked to recreation and heritage, and the underlying support functions that allow all other services to exist. These processes evolve over time and vary across regions, forming an interconnected system that sustains life and economic activity. Recognizing this complexity helps explain why protecting these functions is essential for long-term stability and why thoughtful management must account for both ecological dynamics and human needs. Environmental services operate across different geographic scales, and this variation deeply influences how benefits are experienced. Some ecosystems provide most of their value locally, where communities feel the direct impact of healthy soils, clean water, or stable landscapes. At the same time, those same systems may offer smaller but still significant benefits to broader regions, contributing to watershed stability or climate regulation. Understanding this gradient helps explain why environmental management cannot rely on a single scale of analysis. Decisions made in one area may produce consequences far beyond the immediate surroundings, reinforcing the importance of considering local, regional, and even global effects when evaluating ecosystem contributions. This broader perspective encourages more balanced planning where the full spatial footprint of environmental services is properly recognized. Modern landscapes often reflect a mix of natural processes and human intervention. Fertile soils, rich biodiversity, and stable hydrological cycles represent natural capital that has evolved over long periods. Yet agricultural areas, irrigation systems, breeding programs, and management infrastructures add layers of human-derived capital that shape how ecosystems function today. Both types of capital interact to produce the services societies depend on, from food production to climate stability. This blending raises important questions about sustainability and about how to classify services that emerge from combined natural and human inputs. Recognizing this complexity invites a more nuanced understanding of how ecosystems operate and why their management requires attention to both ecological processes and human choices. Ecosystem services often lose value silently when degradation occurs without proper assessment. Urban expansion, industrial growth, and land conversion can reduce service capacity long before economic systems register the impact. Without effective valuation tools, many of these losses remain hidden, creating a disconnect between environmental change and public awareness. Bringing together monetary estimates, cultural values, and non-market assessments helps reveal the true importance of natural systems. By integrating these perspectives, communities gain a clearer picture of what is at stake and can make more informed decisions about conservation and land use. This shift transforms ecosystems from overlooked backgrounds into essential contributors to social and economic well-being. Human relationships with natural resources have evolved significantly over time. Early societies relied on customary rules and collective management to balance extraction with replenishment. Over time, scientific understanding expanded, linking biodiversity and ecosystem processes to human welfare. Industrialization then reframed nature as a set of individual preferences, treating many environmental services as free goods without accounting for long-term impacts. More recently, new economic mechanisms, such as payment systems for environmental services, have emerged to address these gaps. This historical trajectory illustrates how perceptions of nature shift across eras, shaping the policies and market structures that guide resource management today. In many subsistence communities, ecosystems represent a substantial share of daily income and survival. Forest products, freshwater availability, wild foods, and natural materials all contribute quietly but significantly to household well-being. Studies in India, Indonesia, and Brazil show how these services form an essential economic base, often excluded from conventional statistics. Without acknowledging this dependence, policy decisions risk harming vulnerable populations by degrading the very systems that support them. Recognizing the invisible contribution of ecosystems helps highlight the broader social consequences of environmental decline and underscores the importance of protecting natural resources in areas where livelihoods rely on them the most. Environmental services encompass a wide array of benefits that ecosystems deliver through their natural functions. These benefits can be grouped into categories that help clarify how nature supports human life and economic systems. Understanding these categories provides a structured view of the different ways ecosystems contribute to well-being, from direct material outputs to essential regulatory processes that maintain balance. This overview prepares the ground for a closer look at each type of service and how they interact within the larger ecological system. Provisioning services include the most familiar outputs of ecosystems: food, water, and raw materials. These resources are directly consumed or used by society, making them easy to recognize and measure. Crop production, livestock, fisheries, timber, and freshwater supplies all fall within this group. Their visibility sometimes hides the deeper ecological processes that support them, such as nutrient cycling, soil regeneration, and biodiversity interactions. While provisioning services are often the most economically valued, they depend heavily on the health and stability of less visible ecological functions. Recognizing this connection highlights the need to manage ecosystems holistically rather than focusing solely on material outputs. Extracting resources from nature brings economic benefits, but it can also create costs that remain unnoticed for long periods. When natural materials become commodities, market mechanisms often overlook the ecological impacts of extraction. Converting forests into monoculture plantations, for example, may increase timber production while reducing water availability downstream. Other impacts, such as the loss of flood regulation or increased erosion, may only become apparent long after the initial profits have been realized. This delay makes it easy to underestimate the true cost of extraction and underscores the importance of considering long-term ecological consequences alongside short-term economic gains. Regulating services operate quietly but play a crucial role in maintaining environmental stability. Wetlands, mangroves, and other ecosystems regulate water flow, reducing flood risks and preventing saltwater intrusion. Forests help moderate climate conditions by storing carbon and cooling local environments. Pollinators support food systems by enabling crop reproduction, and natural predators help control pests without the need for synthetic chemicals. These services often go unnoticed until they are disrupted, at which point their absence becomes immediately and painfully clear. Understanding their importance highlights how deeply society depends on intact ecosystems to manage natural variability and prevent costly environmental damage. Many environmental services create value not by producing new goods, but by preventing losses. These avoided costs often surpass the value of traditional economic outputs, even though they rarely appear in financial accounts. Natural defenses such as coastal vegetation can shield communities from erosion and storm surges, avoiding the need for expensive engineered structures. When these ecosystems are degraded, societies suddenly face the financial burden of replacing what nature once provided for free. Recognizing the economic significance of prevention helps shift attention toward conservation and reinforces the idea that protecting ecosystems is not only an environmental priority, but also a sound financial strategy. Supporting services form the base upon which all other ecosystem benefits depend. These are the deep processes that keep nature functioning over long timescales. Primary production captures solar energy and transforms it into forms usable by other living organisms. Nutrient cycling replenishes essential elements in the soil, ensuring continued fertility. Soil formation gradually creates the medium that supports plant life, and habitat provision shapes the physical structure that allows species to survive and reproduce. Without these background functions, the visible services that society relies on would weaken or disappear. Their importance often goes unnoticed because they operate slowly and quietly. Yet they are the threads that hold the entire ecological fabric together. Nutrient cycling sustains the fertility of landscapes by returning critical elements like nitrogen and phosphorus back to the soil. In many forested and agricultural systems, the natural breakdown of organic matter maintains soil quality without the need for continuous artificial inputs. When this cycle is disrupted through excessive biomass removal, soil compaction, or unsustainable land use, ecosystems lose their resilience. Nutrients become depleted faster than they can be naturally restored, making plant growth increasingly dependent on external inputs. Examples from agroecosystems show how thoughtful management practices, such as the use of cover crops or organic mulches, can reinforce natural processes and help maintain long-term fertility. This demonstrates how working with ecological functions rather than against them strengthens ecosystem health. Cultural services connect people to their environments in ways that extend beyond material needs. Natural spaces offer opportunities for recreation, whether through beaches, forests, or trails. They also serve as places for education, where communities, schools, and families experience firsthand the value of ecological stewardship, identity, and sense of place, often stem from the landscapes people grow up in, shaping local traditions and economic choices. In many cultures, certain ecosystems hold spiritual significance, acting as sacred sites for rituals and communal gatherings. These non-material connections illustrate how nature contributes to emotional well-being, cultural continuity, and social cohesion, complementing the more tangible benefits provided by ecosystems. Cultural services are among the most difficult to quantify because they involve emotions, identities, and values that extend beyond market logic. Standard valuation tools may capture willingness to pay for scenic views or travel expenditures, but they often fail to reflect the deeper significance tied to heritage, belonging, or spiritual meaning. These aspects may not require physical presence to be appreciated. Sometimes the knowledge that a species or landscape still exists carries its own value. Because of these limitations, cultural contributions are frequently undervalued in economic planning, which can lead to decisions that erode irreplaceable social and cultural assets. Understanding these intangible dimensions helps emphasize the importance of integrating more holistic approaches when assessing the impacts of environmental change. Healthy ecosystems play a vital role in achieving sustainable development. Their capacity to meet human needs over time depends on maintaining a wide spectrum of services rather than focusing solely on resource extraction. Today, nearly 60% of global ecosystems are deteriorating, a trend that threatens long-term social and economic stability. The total global value of ecosystem services is frequently estimated at figures exceeding global GDP, highlighting the scale of their contribution. More than 3 billion people directly depend on these services for their livelihoods. Ensuring sustainability therefore requires preserving ecological integrity so that benefits can continue to support communities and economies across generations. Many regions now recognize environmental services as central pillars of social and economic well-being. In the European Union, biodiversity and ecosystem functions are treated as essential components of development planning. Policies such as the EU Biodiversity Strategy require member states to assess and map ecosystem conditions within specific timeframes, bringing ecological health into national planning processes. This approach reflects a shift from reactive measures to proactive governance, where maintaining ecosystem function becomes a core objective rather than an afterthought. Similar initiatives elsewhere demonstrate growing acknowledgement that long-term societal progress depends on integrating ecological considerations into policy frameworks. Balancing human needs with ecosystem capacities requires understanding where demand exceeds natural regeneration. Identifying areas under stress helps prioritize where extraction should be limited and where resources are more abundant. Assessing the drivers of these imbalances, such as agricultural expansion or population growth, clarifies the pressures ecosystems face. Monitoring outcomes over time ensures that interventions do not undermine resilience and that management strategies remain aligned with ecological realities. Differentiated approaches, adapted to local conditions, make it possible to maintain ecosystem health while still supporting economic activity. This balance is essential for avoiding long-term degradation and ensuring that resources remain available for future generations. Restoration efforts in coastal regions near Jakarta demonstrate how a single intervention can generate multiple benefits when ecosystems are treated as interconnected systems. Reestablishing mangrove vegetation not only strengthens storm protection, but also rebuilds fish nursery habitats, enhances carbon sequestration, and supports local livelihoods. These outcomes show that restoration can address ecological, economic, and social needs at the same time. By recognizing the interdependencies between different services, restoration programs become more effective and more valuable. This approach highlights how integrated planning can deliver broad, long-lasting impacts in areas facing intense environmental pressure. Improving environmental service management requires a combination of strategic actions. Internalizing externalities ensures that environmental costs are reflected in economic decisions. Strengthening property rights helps reduce free riding and promotes responsible stewardship. Integrating different forms of valuation, monetary and non-monetary, captures the full scope of ecological contributions. Supporting payment schemes rewards stakeholders who actively maintain ecosystem function. Enhancing monitoring provides the data needed to track conditions over time and adjust interventions as circumstances change. Together, these recommendations create a foundation for policies that align economic systems with environmental sustainability. Building resilience requires maintaining the continuous cycle that links healthy ecosystems, effective regulation, and responsible stewardship. When ecosystems degrade, that cycle is disrupted, reducing the ability of natural systems to withstand shocks and provide stable services. Integrating ecological thinking into economic and policy frameworks helps avoid the reactive and costly responses that often follow environmental decline. Recognizing interdependence across systems encourages long-term planning and prioritizes conservation before crises occur. This forward-looking approach strengthens both ecological and human communities, supporting a more secure and sustainable future.